Steam rising, thoughts colliding. Mic is hot and truth's inviting. Pour the coffee, let stories flow. From coast to cosmos, here we go. Signals flicker in the satellite skies. Truths in disguise behind the lies. Coffee and conversations, brewing bold revelations. Question, reflect, stir the pot. Say what's real, say what's not. We sip, we speak, we spark the mind. One live stream at a time. Scandal, satire, sacred lore. Aliens, invasions, and manufactured wars. Cover-ups and cosmic lies. Prophets scrolling end time signs. Puppet masters pull the strings while we debate what silence brings. Is free will just a clever myth of scripted lines and hieroglyphs? We learn, we probe, we caffeinate before the matrix seals our fate. Morning light, truth and doubt in quiet fight. We pour the question, stir the soul, seeking meaning in scroll. Echoes in the common stream, truth and inquiry in equal beat. Coffee and conversation, speculation, truth or tease to chase the thrill, streaming live, unscripted, real.
Good morning, viewers, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about a serious topic. Of course, today what we're going to be talking about is, should the elites be exempted from the laws of the citizens? It's a question that has echoed throughout history, from ancient monarchies to modern democracies. We see it in news headlines and political discussions, and sometimes in our own daily experiences, the idea that some individuals, due to their power, wealth, or influence, might operate under a different set of rules than us. Today, we're not just talking about theory. We're talking about real-world implications, about justice, fairness, and the very foundation of what it means to live in a society governed by law. We'll explore different facets of this debate, look at the arguments for and against, and most importantly, hear what you, our audience, thinks. So get ready to share your thoughts. Be sure to hit the like button. Let's get this started. When we say elites, who are we talking about? We're generally referring to individuals or groups who hold significant power, influence, or resources. This could be political leaders, top corporate executives, incredibly wealthy individuals, or even cultural figures who command immense public attention. An exemption. This isn't just about getting away with something. It could range from actual legal loopholes, preferential treatment in legal proceedings, symbolic leniency, or even just the perception that justice operates differently for them. Now, I know we've all seen cases in the news of people not being prosecuted for serious crimes. And we're going to talk about some of those crimes later on. We're going to talk about some of those cases. We're going to talk about a serious issue. Well, more than one serious issue. But we're going to look at how this works, how elites get preferential treatment in some cases, or how some people are not prosecuted for any crimes, or how some people may be prosecuted for a crime, convicted of serious crimes, but receive absolutely no jail time, no punishment, even when there are guidelines for punishment. The bedrock of many legal systems, especially in democracies, is the principle that all citizens are equal before the law. Now, I want to point out that the United States is not a democracy. It's a constitutional representative republic. And that's a distinction I think that we sometimes overlook. But it's also important to keep that in mind. It's easy to throw the word democracy around, but it's not an accurate term. Historically, true democracies will always devolve into tyranny or chaos. That's why we have a republic. Now, it's just as important that we keep in mind of that. Well, we also keep in mind that the Constitution outlines our laws, and all citizens are supposed to be equal under the law. This means that the law should be applied universally, regardless of status, wealth, or power. If this principle is eroded, the very legitimacy of the legal system is undermined. When elites appear to be above the law, it can breed cynicism and distrust among the general populace. If people believe the system is rigged, why should they follow the rules? This could lead to social unrest, a breakdown of civil order, or general feeling of unfairness that poisons societal cohesion. It's like saying rules for thee, not for me. And that's a very true sentiment. We've heard that statement before. We know that that's where our society is going. Now, people will still continue to follow the law. They will. And they will continue to follow the rules out of fear. Fear. When by executive fiat, a ruler can send militarized troops into a city under the guise of law enforcement, people will obey the government out of fear, no matter how corrupt that government becomes. Laws are designed not just to punish, but also to deter. If powerful individuals know they can escape consequences, what incentive do they have to act ethically or within legal bounds? Holding everyone, including elites, accountable is crucial for maintaining order and preventing abuse. Now, in theory, laws should serve as a deterrent. In practice, that is not true. Laws technically don't serve as a deterrent. They serve as a punishment, but seldom as a deterrent. A person who genuinely wants to do something criminal will do so even if there's a law preventing it. Think about this for a moment. In our modern society, we talk about gun control and mass shootings, all that stuff. But here's the thing with that. What we don't address is the fact that there are laws in place to prevent those things. There are. We have gun-free zones, which does not serve as a deterrent. In fact, it serves as an invitation. Why? Because the attacker knows that the people inside are unarmed. We have laws against murder, but it doesn't prevent it, does it? Now, we have laws against many things. Often law enforcement goes after low-hanging fruit, and that's something to keep in mind here when it comes to deterrence. Now, when it comes to the elites, we're not talking about somebody going on a rampage. We're not. We're talking about people who do far more heinous things and get away with it. And that's because there is no accountability for these people. Allowing exemptions, even small ones, sets a dangerous precedent. It can slowly normalize the idea that power grants privilege, leading to a slippery slope where more and more elites demand special treatment, further distancing them from the general citizenry. Now, that's been going on for a long time. The elites don't just demand special treatment. They get it. They get it. And often they're protected by law enforcement, or they're protected by government. Sometimes as a result of bribery. Sometimes by manipulating the legal system. Or sometimes by a good old cover-up. Do you agree that the principle of equality before the law is non-negotiable? Have you ever seen instances where you felt that elites were treated differently? These are things that you can talk about in the comments below. Now, we know that the elites are treated differently. And we can look at recent events to understand this. And we can also look at recent events to see how elites are protected. We're going to talk about that a little later on. But let's play devil's advocate for a moment. While the idea of equality is strong, some might argue that for different considerations, not necessarily exemptions, but perhaps a different approach in certain circumstances. In cases of high-ranking government officials, particularly in intelligence or national security roles, legal proceedings might involve highly classified information. Some argue that the standard court procedures could jeopardize national security, leading to calls for special tribunals or closed-door proceedings. This isn't about being above the law, but about how the law is applied in sensitive context. But in a closed-door proceeding, how do we know what really goes on? We don't. So how do we know there's true accountability? We don't. Now, there's a clear-cut example of legal exemption, not for an elite in the sense of wealth, but for individuals holding diplomatic status. Diplomats are immune from the laws of the host country to ensure they can perform their duties without fear of harassment or arbitrary arrest. This is a matter of international relations and reciprocal agreements, but it's a worldwide exemption. Do you, the viewers, think that diplomats should be exempt from the laws of host country? Or should they have to follow the same laws as the people of those countries? This next one is a bit more controversial, but it's something that we've seen. And this, of course, is the idea that some entities are too big to fail or too big to jail. In the corporate world, sometimes executives of massive, important companies might face less severe penalties than an average citizen for similar crimes. The argument often is made that fully prosecuting or jailing these individuals could destabilize markets, cost thousands even of jobs, or have broader negative economic consequences. It's a utilitarian argument focusing on the greater good versus the individual justice. Now, we saw that before. We saw that in 2008 with the banking bailout, and of course before that with the auto bailout. With the banking bailout, take for instance, the bankers shorted the loans, caused the housing bubble to pop, collapsed the banking system, and then went to Congress, in which the banking lobby wrote the bill, and Congress approved it, in which the taxpayers bailed the banks out under the premise that the banks are too big to fail. We can't have these banks failing. Now, the banks, in turn, then gave their executives, the people who had caused the problem, huge multi-million-dollar bonuses. Now, what I want to hear from you in the chat or in the comments section is this. Do you think that those bankers were too big to fail and too important to jail? Or do you think that they should have faced real consequences? Should the banks have been allowed to fail? And should those bankers have been jailed for what they did? Leave your thoughts. Now, some might argue that in practice, powerful individuals simply have more resources to navigate the legal system, better lawyers, PR teams, etc. This isn't a legal exemption, but a practical reality that can often look like one, leading to perceived injustice. Now, there's a couple of things here. One is that it is true. Rich people have a lot better lawyers. But the fact that they have more money and can afford better lawyers does give them a legal exemption, does give them an advantage over the average citizen. Because the average citizen is going to most likely be incarcerated, even on a low bail. They're not going to be able to make it. They end up sitting in jail, and they get a public defender. Public defenders are overworked. They don't care. They give a plea bargain and put the person into the system. That's the way it works for the poor. Rich people will seldom spend one night in jail. They'll get booked. Their lawyer gets them out right away. Take, for instance, it's Friday evening. A poor person gets arrested. They're going to sit in jail until, they see a judge on Monday at the earliest. Monday, it's Friday night. They're going to have to sit till Monday to see a judge. However, wealthy people can often get a judge, even on a Friday night, to release their client. Wealthy lawyers can the lawyers for wealthy people will often get a judge to sign off on releasing their client the same night. That way their client doesn't have to sit in jail. So that's an issue. And yes, it is an exemption. It's a preferential treatment to those with money over those who don't have money. Now uh, let's talk about some consequences of these exemptions. First of all, we have to keep in mind that historically, when in societies where rulers or elites are truly above the law, those societies often devolve into authoritarian regimes or dictatorships, where there's no check on power and abuse becomes inevitable. Do we see that in our own society now? What do you think? If the laws don't apply to you, then personal gain becomes the primary motivator. Corruption flourishes, leading to a system where favors and connections dictate outcomes rather than merit or justice. Well, that's true. That is true. You know, there's the old saying that crime doesn't pay. But when you look at the banking cartel, Big Pharma, the elites who have not been and will not be prosecuted for all of their involvement with the islands, or with Jeffrey and the island, all of that, that's corruption. It's also crime, but in this case, it's crime that pays because they're wealthy, they're powerful, and they get to keep doing it. So justice is never served. Extreme inequality before the law can lead to widespread despair and anger. When the social contract breaks and citizens feel entirely disenfranchised, unfairly treated, and ultimately the consequences can be civil unrest, protest, or even revolution, history is replete with these examples. That is true. However, I would say that it's unlikely that that would happen in the United States. And that's because Americans fall into two categories: lazy and easily distracted. Let me explain. Most of those that scream about revolution, they're too lazy to come out of the basement to ever take a stand for anything. And those who might want to do something can be easily distracted. And opinions can change. Think about this for a moment. The people who used to demand, the majority of people who used to demand that all of the files, the Epstein files, be released, they're not demanding that now because their political leader, the one they admire, idolize, that'd be Trump, has told them it's a hoax. It's a hoax. So they're distracted by other things, so they don't care. They don't care about justice against the elites because one of the elites told them it was a hoax, and they do what he says. Now, the irony is they're the same people that would normally scream about, well, we want those names, we want to expose these people. And they used to scream about it until they were told not to. So think about how that works. Is they can be distracted and manipulated. Now, the thing about we're going to talk about the Epstein client list for a little bit and all of that. First of all, what we have to keep in mind is that Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is using the government shutdown as an excuse not to swear in a Democratic Congresswoman because her vote would be the tipping scale to force a discharge petition and a floor vote on the release of the Epstein files, which would pass. But he doesn't want that vote to go on because he doesn't want it to go on record, the people that would oppose releasing those files. And he stated he opposes releasing those files because he believes that the Justice Department should handle it. Well, what has Kash Patel over at the FBI said about it? He said first, oh yeah, we've got the files, we're going to release them. Oh, what did Pam Bondi say? Yeah, we've got the files. Oh no, there's no files. Then, of course, what did Kash Patel then say later on during a congressional hearing? He says there's no evidence that Jeffrey ever did anything. He did not traffic anyone. Representative Comer from the state of Texas stated that Maxwell told Todd Blanche, the assistant U.S. attorney, that Trump wasn't involved, so Trump's completely exonerated. Now let's keep in mind something here. Todd Blanche used to be President Trump's personal attorney. Try to keep that in mind when we think about these things, is how corruption in the elites goes. Now, we've seen the connections between Trump, Epstein, and all of them. And of course, that goes into Clinton, Prince Andrew, so forth, so on. All of these elites that went to that island, all of them, or those that visited Epstein's New York apartment, or may have written $22,000 checks to Epstein and written on them, for a woman or whatever. Really shouldn't put giant checks with memos that say for a woman, out in the open, but hey, these people have no shame, right? So the thing about that is that they're never going to release those files. They're never going to tell us the truth. They're never going to hold these elites accountable. Now, the reality is that those files should be made public. These are people, of course, we're talking about who did serious harm to children. Those files should be made public. You can omit the names of the victims, but the perpetrators, their names should be public so that the public can then at least shun these people, cut off services to them. That's something that we need to look at. If the law will not prosecute these people, then perhaps society can shun them. And that's something to think about. Now, I want to talk about another side of that on a recent case I was made aware of. But it deals with the same topic. So the government has no vested interest, first of all, in protecting a person. In fact, they have no duty to protect an individual person. That's something that is established. But what if the law actively protects criminals and goes after those who would expose criminals? Let's talk about this case over here. A group known as Oklahoma Predator Prevention. What do? They go out and expose would-be child predators, meaning they have decoys online and these men contact what they believe are children and try to set up meetings with the children for adult relations. These are bad people. These are very bad people. The predators are bad people, that is. Not the predator prevention. Obviously, they're not bad people. They're doing something that they feel is right. Now, the point I'm making to this is that recently 3 members of their team were arrested. They were arrested for what the McClellan County Sheriff's Office in Texas alleges is unlawful restraint and exposing the victim to substantial risk of bodily injury. Now, their sheriff's investigator is Andrew Hermes, He had warrants issued for for the three men, and which was then turned over to the U.S. Marshal's office that went and arrested them. They were arrested in Oklahoma. Two of them, at least, were arrested in Oklahoma. Yeah, and one was arrested in McClellan County, Texas, which is Waco. Now, these are felony charges which carry a maximum punishment of 10 years in prison. Now, I want to read the quote here from the sheriff's investigator. It says, "The video revealed a coordinated effort by 3 OPP members to control and restrict a man's movements, including directing him where to stand, corralling him into a secluded area while using aggressive and profane language." I thought free speech still exists in this country. The situation escalated to the point where the man lost consciousness, collapsed, and struck his head. It was only at that point that the OPP members notified law enforcement. Okay. Hermes said that while law enforcement is committed to protecting children, the vigilante-style approach of people such as those affiliated with OPP possesses its own threat to the community. Now I want to stop there. So, videotaping and exposing, according to him, videotaping and exposing a child predator is vigilante activity, and it poses a threat to the community. What threat does that pose to the community? Does it pose a threat to, I don't know, predators that are being exposed? Are they afraid that these predators might lose their jobs or be ostracized in their community? Are they afraid that real victims might come forward and they might actually have to get off their butts and prosecute these people? Think about that for a moment. He goes on to say, we can't have these guys out here doing the kind of things they're doing. Too many things can go wrong. If someone suspects that there's a threat to children, the right thing to do is contact law enforcement and let us take it from there. Well, here's the thing. Law enforcement isn't doing anything about this issue. They're not actively trying to go out and go after these people, and in fact, in many cases, they're protecting them. So I do have questions about this. One is now before I get to those questions, I want to point out one more thing. This is not the first group of predator catchers that this guy Andrew Hermes has had arrested. He's had a similar group arrested and charged with unlawful restraint before. So my question is this: who is this guy protecting? Is there someone higher up in the sheriff's office that is a predator? Are there people in the city government of Waco? Or is he protecting county officials in McClellan County? Because it appears, on the surface at least, that this guy is actively protecting child predators. Now, think about that for a moment. Think about that. He's actively protecting child predators. But that's no different than Kash Patel and Pam Bondi actively protecting the people named in the Epstein files by not releasing those files, not prosecuting anyone. Think about this. Ghislaine Maxwell was charged with trafficking. But who did she traffic to? Have any of the other people named in any document of hers been charged with a crime? No. Now, after she met with Todd Blanche, of course, Maxwell was transferred against BOP policies to a minimum security prison in Texas, which is said to be like a resort for federal inmates. So they moved her against BOP policy to a cushy prison after she met with Trump's former attorney. Just think about how corrupt that really is and how corrupt even that appears on the surface. Now, here's the next issue. What about Sean Combs? Sean Combs was convicted of trafficking, but he was sentenced to 4 years. Now, and of course, now the thing about all that is that Trump has said he's considering a pardon for these people, for Maxwell and Diddy, calling their sentences an injustice. But what about justice for those victims? Do they not get justice? Because it was an injustice? The punishment was an injustice to the elites? Because I will guarantee you this. There are people who have done far less serious things that are serving longer prison sentences. There are. And the only difference is that those people that are serving longer prison sentences, they're not wealthy, powerful, influential people. Now, those are just things to think about. And the reason I contrast these two cases, the case for the Epstein file and the OPP thing, is because it exposes both sides. It exposes how far people will go to protect child predators and avoid prosecuting them. Now, the question is this. Should the elites be above the law? Should political figures be above the law? Should wealthy individuals be exempt from laws that govern the rest of society? I want to hear from you, viewers. Leave your comments down below. Now, I want to point out another thing. The FBI, under the Trump appointed FBI director, Christopher Wray, covered up the Hunter Biden laptop, which also ties into some very despicable things, and there are said to be images of Hunter and underage girls. Now, that was Trump's own FBI. Covered it up. They continued to cover it up, even during Biden's administration. Because you see, here's the thing. This isn't a one-party or two-party thing. This isn't about political parties. Because if you haven't figured it out yet, political parties are just another distraction. These elites use the two-party illusion, and that is the two-party system is an illusion because it gives you a false sense of choice when you're still voting for the same thing. Now, the illusion of choice through the two-party system is manipulated by the elites. But those elites don't care about any of it. They only care about protecting their own. And it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum they are. They will do whatever they can to protect their own. Now, they protected Hunter. They protect Jeffrey, Andrew, Donald. They protect all of them. And why is that? Why do they feel the need to protect them? That's a good question for you, the viewers, to think about. Also, I want to know from you, the viewers out there, what do you think about having all of these files released to the public? Would it change your perception of people if you found out that they were listed in the Epstein files, as an example? Now, I want to point out that when we talk about the corruption also is that we've got to deal with corruption in the that protects these elites in the DOJ and in the FBI. Now, it's been reported that the FBI spent over 1,000 man-hours going through those documents to isolate and remove any mention of Trump. 1,000 man-hours. Now, if there were no mentions in there at all to begin with, why would they need 1,000 hours? Somebody knows what's all in there. They're purposely trying to omit things. We know that. So that's what's called a cover-up. But why? What is really in those files? We need unredacted versions. The only thing that should be redacted is victims' names. That's it. It doesn't matter who the perpetrator is. The perpetrator should be exposed. Even if the perpetrator is sitting in the Oval Office. But can society handle the truth when it's revealed of how bad the corruption is and how favored the elites really are? Could society handle that revelation? That's a question to ponder. That's a question that should really make you think. How fragile is our society? How fragile is society if it will collapse at the exposure of the crimes of the elites? I want to hear from you in the comments section. What are your thoughts on all of this? What are your thoughts on two-tier justice? What are your thoughts on the elites? Should they be held accountable for the crimes they commit, or should they be exempted from those crimes? Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking the big questions.